Good morning, everyone. Hope you have your coffees ready because it seems the October surprise has now landed. Now, let me explain. It's less than 2 weeks from the 2024 election, coming up just on November 5th, and a flurry of stories have now come out against Donald J. Trump. And you've probably seen some of it, right? There's the big one right now that is making rounds across the media spectrum, and the main article is from The Atlantic. Let me show you this. This is their headline. They said, Trump, I need the kind of generals that Hitler had. And that's the narrative. Look, they were criticized because of the source of that alleged statement, right? I'll detail this and other reports that have been coming out, right, all around a similar time, notably, about Trump and the lead up to the elections. Also, there's another important topic I want to go into today. We're now seeing the Chinese Communist Party alongside BRICS nations doing what they've been saying they're going to do for a long time. They're renewing their push for de-dollarization. And this ties into a bigger plan, including the announcement of a BRICS dollar or BRICS currency, right? And they're also talking about creating what they call the multipolar world order, which many of you know I've talked about quite a bit. Now, first, I want to go into what's happening, though, with the U.S. elections. And let me show you, right? There's a big flurry of stories, a whole bunch of them, reports being framed as the October surprise. And we were waiting for it. It seems it's here. Now, these focus heavily around claims from former White House Chief of Staff John Kelly under former President Donald Trump. And this is important because if you were to step back from the noise, this is what it is. It's a ton of claims from anonymous sources, and anonymous sources said this and that, and then John Kelly being one of the only main sources making these claims. And so a lot of this hinges on his comments and then the analysis of people going on top of that. And then you have a lot of people who are going public denying these things were ever said. Let me explain, right? This is around claims that Trump disparaged U.S. troops as well, and the reports are receiving, well, let's say, a mixed response. Now, The Atlantic published one of the main pieces on this. There were a few of them. The Atlantic said this, Trump, I need the kind of generals that Hitler had. The Republican nominee's preoccupation with dictators and his disdain for the American military is deepening. And this is by Jeffrey Goldberg of, again, The Atlantic. He's like the chief editor there. And he's known for doing a lot of articles like this, which have relied on some, let's say, anonymous sourcing and have had many people come out and say that it never happened. Now, look, the piece focuses on claims against Trump. It starts, though, with the 2020 story, when then-President Donald Trump held a press conference with the family of Army Private Vanessa Guillen, who had been killed by another soldier at Fort Hood in Texas. And during Trump's meeting with the family, he offered to pay for the funeral expenses. And then, he basically says, I'll pay for this, send me the bill, essentially. They told him right then that the military would cover the costs. The Atlantic report then alleges that later on, when Trump was told the cost of the funeral, he said disparaging things and said not to pay it. Now look, other people who were actually present at the meeting publicly denied that Trump ever said this. The Atlantic article cites anonymous sources on the claims of what Trump said. Public sources say it never happened. Now, the story then goes on to allege that Trump wants to claim that basically he said privately, he said, I need the kind of generals that Hitler had. And it suggests that Trump wanted people that were loyal to him. Now, The Atlantic was criticized for that line as well, since it attributed the claims also to unnamed sources who it says heard him say it. It's hearsay. And then others came forward as well to say that Trump never said this. Anonymous sources, they're not saying who, claim they heard Trump say it. People came up publicly who were actually present and said Trump never said this. Take it for what you will, right? Now, after the story came out, Myra Guillen, the sister of the murdered soldier, she posted this on X. She said, wow, I don't appreciate how you are exploiting my sister's death for politics. Hurtful and disrespectful to the important changes she made for service members. President Donald Trump did nothing but show respect to my family and Vanessa, again, the murdered soldier. She said, in fact, I voted for President Trump today. So she came out and criticized these, October surprise pieces going around. Now look, among the left-leaning news outlets, the way this is being framed, the main focus from that piece is not so much on the soldier, but more on statements Trump made to former White House Chief of Staff John Kelly. And the comments had first been reported in the book, The Divider, Trump in the White House. And so you have a book come out, The Atlantic come out, New York Times also did a piece, and there's a few other things. Now, the New York Times published a story alongside this, also on these quotes from John Kelly. They quoted him on many of the exact same claims, and that piece is also now making rounds at the same time. Now, CNN, they played a clip of Kelly making the statements he gave to New York Times. Watch this.
He commented more than once that, that Hitler did some good things too. And of course, if you know history, again, I think he's lacking in that.
Now, look, given the seriousness of this, many critics were questioning, why did Kelly not make this accusation sooner? Why did he wait more than 5 years until a couple weeks just before the 2024 elections to make these claims public? And, on that note, others pointed out some figures involved in the new article were also involved in the claims that Trump had called service members losers and suckers. In fact, it involves the exact same figures. The exact same author at The Atlantic wrote that piece, and the only source that didn't back down from the claims or didn't discredit it was John Kelly, suggesting again that based on the credibility of that one, that the credibility reflects on the current stories. Now, the losers and suckers story, that goes back to 2020. That was from the same author at The Atlantic. It claimed that Trump canceled a visit to an American cemetery near Paris in 2018 because he believed American troops who died in the battle of this, World War I battle were, quote, suckers, and that he didn't want to go to a cemetery of losers. That's what The Atlantic claimed. Now, given that, there's other reports coming out. Trump said the claims were false, and the reason he canceled was not because he disparaged the troops at all, but because there was a bad weather warning and the bad weather prevented him from going. Now, CBS News later obtained an email that confirmed there was a bad weather call for Trump's flight that day from the U.S. Marine Corps. And so it actually turned out that, yes, Trump was given a warning from the U.S. Marine Corps. The email was actually obtained by CBS News, and Trump's reasoning for not going was not what was reported, it seems, but instead at least partly this, right? And the claims were later labeled as false by almost every single official who was present. Everyone who was with Trump that day, everybody who was around him that day, they all made public statements saying Trump never said that, except Kelly. Now, the Trump campaign actually lists these quotes on a fact check. Here's just a couple of what people said. Zach Fuentes, former deputy to Chief of Staff General John Kelly, said, quote, I did not hear POTUS, President of the United States, call anyone losers when I told him about the weather. Honestly, do you think General Kelly would have stood by and let anyone call fallen Marines losers? John Bolton, former National Security Advisor, said this, quote, I did not hear either of those comments or anything even resembling them. I was there at the point in time that morning when it was decided that he would not go to Ain Marne Cemetery. He decided not to do it because of John Kelly's recommendation. It was entirely a weather-related decision, and I thought the proper thing to do. Now, one of the few people who said otherwise, in fact, I believe the only one, publicly reported at least, was John Kelly. And Trump addressed this and those claims during a 2020 press conference. Watch this.
Nobody that feels more strongly about our soldiers, our wounded warriors, our soldiers that died in war than I do. It's a hoax. Just like the fake dossier was a hoax. Just like the Russia was a hoax. It was a total hoax, no collusion. Just like so many other things, it's a hoax. And you'll hear more of these things, totally unrelated, as we get closer and closer to election. Sometimes the sources are just people that are disgruntled former so-called employees.
Well, my question is sort of about that. I mean, the notable voice that's been missing from the denials is your former Chief of Staff, John Kelly, who was obviously intimately involved in this. How are we supposed to
Well,
read
look,
the fact that John
here's the
Kelly
thing.
hasn't?
I know John Kelly. He was with me, didn't do a good job, had no temperament, and ultimately he was petered out. He was exhausted.
Now, keep in mind the significance of that. The last time this took place was in 2020. That was also right before the presidential elections. And the quotes, again, accusing Trump of disparaging U.S. troops was also something that happened right before the election. And back to the current one, the current October surprise we're now seeing. The same figures, the same authors, the same news outlet making very similar claims, in addition to new claims claiming that Trump, has some fascination with dictators and so on, right? Now look, alongside the New York Times piece that just came out and the Atlantic piece that just came out, interesting at the same time, Vice President Kamala Harris actually held a press event at the Naval Observatory in Washington, D.C., where she criticized Donald Trump over these claims. Watch.
So yesterday we learned that Donald Trump's former chief of staff, John Kelly, a retired 4-star general, confirmed that while Donald Trump was president, he said he wanted generals like Adolf Hitler had. Donald Trump said that because he does not want a military that is loyal to the United States Constitution. He wants a military that is loyal to him.
Now look, that press conference was criticized by some as a possible violation of the Hatch Act, since, Harris used the official presidential seal and official position as vice president for what appeared to be a campaign event. Although look, keep in mind, we often see accusations like this and nothing usually happens with it. Notably as well, Congress, they had a whole probe back in 2019 where they accused around 13 Trump officials of also violating the Hatch Act. But, the Hatch Act issue is important because what happens when you make an official presidential announcement using the official seal, using the powers of the president or vice president? Well, this is what happens. If Harris had said those quotes during, let's say, a rally or a campaign event, do you think it would have gotten the same attention as her making an official announcement from her position as vice president? Of course, if you make an official announcement as president or vice president, you get all the cameras, you get the news there, and it's different from a campaign event. And so when an event like that has the effect of basically working as a campaign event, it uses that platform as the vehicle for it. Now that said, this is not the first time we've seen things like that. Trump has been accused of that as well when he was president. Biden notably has given events where he's talked about the MAGA extremists, although it was far enough away from the campaign to have been considered like a violation of the Hatch Act. But this is something we are seeing. But look, aside from that, these recent events are looking like the October surprise. There's another one coming out now where basically they're saying that there's videos of Trump sexually harassing somebody and groping someone. They're saying there's a video, you just have to believe it's there until we see it. Again, we'll see what happens. The basic issue is this, though. They've already accused Trump of this. How many times has Trump been accused of sexual, issues? How many times is he being accused of being like Hitler or whatever else? It's the same narrative. Now look, the comparisons with Trump and Hitler and fascism, these have been the general political narrative against him since 2016. We've been hearing this since the 2016 election. Some of the anonymous claims are being called into question by people who are actually present. It's not clear whether it actually happened or not. They're probably not going to ever back down off the claims, but this is where the political debate is right now. Now, it seems the main source, if you were to really step back from all the noise, at least on the Trump talking about Hitler claims, there's a lot of anonymous sources. John Kelly is the main source. And so in a normal news environment, the headline would have been, John Kelly says such and such. And so, again, you can decide which side you believe, depending on which side you think is more credible. Now look, in other news, the Pentagon is now confirming that North Korea has sent troops to Russia. They've actually done it now. I'll be talking more about this after I come back from a quick break, so stay tuned.
Experts agree. One of the best ways to protect against financial uncertainty is to diversify your portfolio. Learn how physical gold and silver can secure your retirement funds from today's economic challenges with a gold IRA from American Hartford Gold. You can safeguard your wealth with no penalties or taxes when you transfer your current qualifying retirement accounts. Call now and our precious metals specialists will send you a free information kit, no cost or obligation. American Hartford Gold, a trusted industry leader with an A+ from the Better Business Bureau, has a 5-star rating from thousands of happy clients. Whether you are getting physical precious metals in a gold IRA or delivered to your doorstep, we offer only the highest quality gold and silver. For your peace of mind, we also offer a no-fee buyback commitment, a low-price guarantee, along with free shipping and free insurance. So don't wait. Call the number on your screen today and secure your financial future.
Hey, welcome back. Now look, the Pentagon is now confirming that North Korea has sent troops to Russia, although it's not yet clear whether they're there to fight in Ukraine or not. Reuters actually said this. They said the United States said for the first time on Wednesday that it had seen evidence that North Korea has sent 3,000 troops to Russia for possible deployment in Ukraine, a move that could mark a significant escalation in Russia's war against its neighbor. Now, it says U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, speaking in Rome, said it would be, quote, very, very serious if the North Koreans were preparing to fight alongside Russia in Ukraine, as Kiev has alleged. But he said it remained to be seen what they would be doing there. In other words, yes, they're there. They don't know what they're there for. At least we don't know what they're there for. Now, North Korea, for its part, they become a key player in that war. Actually, interestingly, North Korea and South Korea are kind of having their own proxy war in that region now. Many people point to Ukraine and Russia as a proxy war. You have, of course, China being the key enabler of Russia, and again, other countries playing a role in that. You have the United States and NATO being the main enablers of Ukraine. It's a proxy war to an extent. And these, again, outside influences are enabling the war to continue. Now you have the Asia-Pacific region getting dragged into this. North Korea with Russia, South Korea doing arms supplies to an extent and otherwise, but not that much, but now very likely getting pulled more heavily into it as well. North Korea is one of the main suppliers of weapons to Russia. And a lot of people don't know this, right? North Korea, one of its biggest industries is arms dealing, right? They're arms traffickers. They do, again, firearms, they do small arms and so on. They do even to an extent rockets and missiles. North Korea, notably, two of the largest arms dealers, arms traffickers in Iran and that region are North Korean. And, this is also why during the, again, October 7th attack on Israel, right, coming from Gaza, a lot of the terrorists had weapons from North Korea. Why is that? It's because North Korea supplies a lot of those weapons to that region. Now, given the fact that North Korea has gotten involved, what does that mean? Remember, Russia was starting to go into its, weapon stores going back to World War II. You had people fighting with old rusty guns from World War II. Not even just Kalashnikovs, like old guns, right? Given that, they were also pulling from their stores of ammunition that was way past its expiration date. They were using ammunition from like World War II. They needed guns, they needed ammo. North Korea, through an agreement with Russia, has begun supplying that. And so Russia now has the weapons they need to keep the war going and the financial support and political support through the CCP to keep the war going. And so this is enabling it to continue. Now, look, Russia recently had signed a defense pact with North Korea saying that both countries will aid each other in a military conflict. If either Russia or North Korea goes to war, the other will come to its aid. And why does that matter? Well, Russia is currently at war. So is North Korea. The Korean War never legally ended. And so given the fact that both countries are technically at war, it means that they're backing each other in those wars. North Korea, we now see actually taking action on this, moving troops to support Russia. We don't know for what yet. But for South Korea, this is sending a big message. Because if Russia is saying they will support North Korea in a war, and North Korea is legally at war with South Korea, what does that mean for South Korea? Well, look, because of this, it is possible South Korea could get involved with this. They're now saying it, in fact. Voice of America said, quote, South Korea is renewing its threat to send weapons to Ukraine days after releasing intelligence alleging that North Korea plans to deploy a large number of troops to support Russia's invasion. South Korea will consider sending Ukraine weapons for defense and attack, according to the Yonhap news agency, which cited an unnamed senior presidential official on Tuesday. Now, this South Korean media also reported that Seoul may send military and intelligence personnel to Ukraine, troops and intel officers, to analyze North Korean battlefield tactics and assist in the interrogation of captured North Koreans. Now, in a statement, they say that South Korea's National Security Council called for the, quote, immediate withdrawal of North Korean troops from Russia and pledged unspecified, quote, phased countermeasures, suggesting that they will have different waves of support of different natures. We don't know what that'll be yet. Now look, this actually is bigger than just that region. This is bigger than just some regional conflict. South Korea is in an interesting place. South Korea, while again, one of America's largest military bases is in South Korea. South Korea has been a very close ally of the United States since the Korean War. South Korea, to an extent, just like Japan and just like to an extent Germany, were built heavily by the United States after the ends of the wars. And again, South Korea, because of that, tends to be very close to the U.S. But South Korea, being right next to China, also has a lot of influence from the Chinese Communist Party, and they tend to get pulled in both directions. Notably, some attributed this to the reason why South Korea is not part of the Quad alliance against China. India, Japan, Australia, they're part of it. Japan has an alliance also to an extent with Taiwan, and again, also with the Philippines, as does the United States. Meaning, most countries in that region are picking a side. Most countries in that region are going towards the CCP or towards the United States. South Korea is one of the very few, at least among more westernized type countries, that is not really taking one hard direction or the other. They're kind of in the middle. And given this, if South Korea begins getting involved in a war against Russia, and Russia has a no-limits agreement with China, the Chinese Communist Party, this means that South Korea will be positioning itself not just against North Korea, not just against Russia, but also to a very large extent against the CCP. This is a major, major development for them. Not to mention that South Korea is actually also one of the largest arms dealers in the world. Among first world countries, they're one of the biggest arms dealers and has actually built an arms industry outside the United States. They actually have very good firearms. They make some really quality stuff. And on this note too, if this were to take place, this conflict, it would also push South Korea more in line with the alliance with the United States. Something, again, I've done a lot of reporting in South Korea, something that the current administration, the current president in South Korea said he wants to do. Again, moving more towards an alliance with the U.S., and that means allies with Europe, that means allies with other countries in the Asia-Pacific region, especially Japan, which they have a lot of historical tensions with. And this is important as well as it relates to the Arctic and the growing battle over the Arctic. Now look, right alongside these reports, it was also reported that Russia, right after this, flew 2 strategic bombers over neutral waters in the Sea of Japan. And you see Sea of Japan, a lot of people say, oh, maybe threats against Japan. Well, what's just north of that? That's South Korea. And so for a lot of people, this could be perceived also as a direct threat, a direct kind of hostility towards South Korea as it talks about getting involved in this conflict. And look, in addition to this, something bigger just happened when it comes to the US dollar, the international economy, and the push for so-called de-dollarization. The Chinese Communist Party, along with BRICS nations, are renewing their push for this. This actually ties into a broader plan which Russian President Vladimir Putin recently reiterated, something I've been talking about for a long time, the creation of what they call the multipolar world order. And Putin's calling this an irreversible process. I'll be talking about the new push against the dollar and what it means only on epochtv.com. So those of you joining us on YouTube, Facebook, Rumble, X, this is the time to click on that link in the description or in the live chat and come and join us. Now, you'll get the rest of this episode where we have the live Q&A. We can answer your questions and have a conversation. And so again, join us. Click on that link now, and I will see you on epochtv.com.